I'm not sure I'm comfortable with being so predictable here. Is it on? Yeah, it seems it's on. This is not going to be hugely interesting this morning. There's a bunch of straight lines here on the border. Anybody that was here last night know we finished outlining all the characters. The woman and the octopus are now outlined and finished. Her thatch and her hair still to come. We'll get the borders here finished first. In last night's stream I had pretty much nothing to say. Jed was waiting when we came online, so he and a bunch of the viewers were chatting about games for almost all the time I was here, so I just sat back and did my part, and he took care of all the conversation. Game talk. Very difficult grain to carve straight here. It's I'm carving with the grain, but it's at an angle just like 3 or 5 degrees away from where my line wants to go. Hey, good morning, everybody. Hello. Oh, Francis is here. Good morning, guy. Can you take care of the woodblock questions today? Come on, keep it straight, Dave. in the home stretch now in this block, just get these borders finished, clear out the waste wood in the middle, and then the fun begins. There's clearly a lot of problem at the moment with the light from my scope here. It's an LED and it's too bright, and the camera's not understanding what it is, and we're getting too much reflection and washout. So before I do the next hair steps, I'm going to try with Aoyama-san this afternoon, our staff member, to set up a better light for this. So over the next couple of days, I'm off tomorrow, tomorrow's Sunday, as I posted on the site there. I'm off to Yokohama for it's a kids event. We're doing a giant print party for some few hundred kids. So I'll be off Sunday, but when we get back to it Monday, it'll be the delicate hair carving, and I've got to get a better light for that, so we'll see if I can figure it out today. Oh, hard spot there. Look at that. Crunch, click. Put it around here. Okay, now get that V out. Sorry with all the shifting around today. It's not, we're not focused on one area. It's going to be all over the place. So there'll be a lot of block shifting. It's hard to see the wide spots. I shouldn't mess with this at this point. Wait till the test printing and you can see which parts are a bit too wide. There's one here. It's difficult to see at this stage, so I should just leave it. Get a bit straighter here. Do we have a question sound? Move it around just a second, get ready for the next one here. Hi. Question. Cheap tools to recommend? Nay, I know. This comes up and I never know what to say. I know. There are people who want to try something like this and feel that they need to get kind of a really sort of get the right tools and the right paper and the right wood. And that's okay, that's admirable, that's fine. The thing about this is, though, it's really kind of a quirky thing to do, either as a hobby or as a job. And there are people who get it and end up doing it, and most people actually don't. They might try it once and then, well, whatever, that's not for me. So I've learned over the years, really, really, really don't try and encourage people to spend too much money on this when you're first having a go at it. But it all depends on your own character. You know, I've told about it many times. My own first attempts was just with whatever was in the house. It was a piece of wood, a piece of maple that was scheduled for the fireplace. It was kind of flat, looked like I could make a print on it. I used like a kind of X-Acto knife, you know, the kind that you put the blade in and take it out and put the blade in and take it out, you know, not an actual real Japanese cutting knife. I didn't have any special laminated paper. I just used some kind of copy paper of some kind, took a photocopy from a book, pasted it, glued it down onto the wood, and got cutting. And then at printing time too, I had no special baron. I used a rice spoon, and the pigments just whatever was in my kids' drawers, you know, watercolor pigments. But that was enough to show me that, hey, this is kind of fun and kind of cool, and I like this. And even though the thing had a million chips and it was all kind of bizarre and it certainly wasn't very good, it was enough to let me know that I'd like to do a bit more of this. And then you start hunting around and maybe thinking about spending money on some tools. So I'm not sure what to say, you know. Half of me says it doesn't matter, just whatever's in your house right now is enough to make a first level woodblock print. But if you're a different personality from me, maybe that's not what you want to do. You want to go ahead and spend, you know, some money and get some tools. So I'm not sure what to say. As far as usable tools, that place in America, McLean's over in Oregon, and the mail order place here in Japan, Wood-like Matsumura, all the stuff they're selling is okay. You know, even the student, they've both got some really, really inexpensive student level cutting knives. I think set of 5 or set of 6, something like that. That's got a few of the shapes you need. You don't need to spend like the $600 set, of course, nothing like that. You're talking about a few tens or whatever. I don't know what they are in the catalog. Don't spend too much money first time around. Don't worry so much about the quality of the stuff. And that first test print, it'll tell you two things. It'll tell you, you know, I like doing this, I'm going to do some more. But it will also tell you what went wrong. You know, you start to see that tool is no good. and you start to learn what to look for. So I don't know where you are, the question coming from. If it's the States, look at the Maclean's catalogue, they're online. If it's in England, there's a couple of places, just, what's the word, intaglio printmakers or something? There's a couple of places over there selling the tools they get from Japan. Here in Tokyo is Matsumura, Woodblock Matsumura, who ships all over the world. And he has beginner sets. But my own experience is I got started without any of that stuff. This is totally different. The wood at this end of the block near her hair, this is the base of the tree, and it's much harder than the wood up at the other end there. So this would have been this, the tree would have grown standing up that way. And ideally I would have had a block that was really super hard all over, but you have what you have, and I moved the image around so that her hair, the finest delicate part, was closest to the base end of the tree. It's night and day difference, what I'm doing just now and what I was doing 2 minutes ago carving up at the other end. Much harder down here. Last Tuesday over in Ome, and our worker here, Lee-san, Aoyama-san, and I were out there working on boxes for the subscription series. That's what we do on our day off in Ome. And to walk back to the station, we walked through a park. There's a riverside park in Ome. And years ago, they planted cherry trees along the riverbank. They're now fully mature trees. Like this must have been 30, 40 years ago. And somebody screwed up when they were planting them. They're the kind of tree that are called Somei Yoshino, the ones that make beautiful cherry blossoms. It's not the kind of tree we use, Yamazakura, mountain cherry, which doesn't have very spectacular blossoms, but it's got wood that is just the right kind of grain pattern for what we need. But when they were planting those trees, they must have planted with little, like, I don't know what you call them, a tree that's only like a few months old. It's some sort of sprout tree, they seed them in a nursery somewhere, let them grow for a couple of months or a year or something, then go and plant them. And mixed in with the batch of Somei Yoshino must have been one Yamazakura tree. And when they were that little, I guess nobody could tell, so they just planted it, bang, 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 bang. And now in Ome, when you cross the bridge on the river to get to my place, the third tree from the left as you cross the river is a mountain cherry tree. And Aoyama-san looked at it yesterday, and the base of it is just about right, and you could get the first 1.5 meters. And we looked at it like with lust in our eyes. This is just about ready for us, So, and this is 100% a joke. Don't send the police after me, but we were looking at it, one night. And unfortunately for me, it's still pretty young. It's 30, 40 years old. So it won't be dying anytime soon by the time that tree's ready to move out of the way because it's dangerous to the park. I will unfortunately be no longer looking for wood. The trees are out there. That's the frustrating part, We've talked about this many times before. The example is with the tuna fish. They're talking now about the tuna, the Atlantic tuna, Pacific tuna. They're trying to stop taking them because people have been eating so much of that stuff in recent years, the population has crashed. And if we don't do something soon, like they'll become extinct or something, Our wood situation is the reverse. It's not like that. The trees are up there in the mountains. And because there's been no commercial demand for them, nobody's harvesting them, and the supply chain is broken. So the cherry trees are out there, seeding themselves naturally, growing, getting mature, getting just ready for woodblock printmaking, and getting old, getting rotten, falling over and dying. They're out there. In the old days, there were teams who scoured the mountains looking for good cherry trees for printers, for carving. When they found them, they made the deal with the landowner, arranged for it to be cut, floated down to Edo or Tokyo, whatever it was, however they did it back in those days. No helicopters. And the wood went into the lumber yards and into the shops that were specially doing for this craft. There were dozens of them. The whole supply chain now is broken because of lack of demand. We've got the demand, but one shop like us and my friend Asuka-san and whatever we're going to rebuild over the next few years is not enough to build a countrywide supply chain. They were professional tree hunters, for woodblock printmaking. It seems bizarre, but they were. And those guys are now gone. Oh, that's hard. Where are we? Tree robbing, so unfortunately a bit too noisy. Talk about knives. Francis, are you taking care of this? Thank you. I've just seen like 1 line in 10 here, so. Sankaku, V-shaped blades, yeah. I don't have any. I don't have a V, and I don't have any small, what they're called, small marunumi. The U-shaped gouges. The traditional carvers don't use them. So I have no V's and no U's. I think that one's cut. I'm not sure what Francis is explaining about it. Maybe I'm covering the same thing. I don't know. The modern people use V's. The traditional ones don't. We cut our lines individually with this one. If we need a V, we just come in from both sides. We can get perfect accuracy that way. The V didn't come into use until the 20th century when the Sosaku guys, the guys doing creative printmaking by themselves, not the craftsmen, the self-drawing, cutting artists, they use the V all the time because they draw into the wood. Maybe there might be just a sketch on it, and then they attack the wood and draw the print onto the wood. So no V's for us. I don't even have one. I don't know how to sharpen it. Don't know anything about it. Which is sometimes surprising to people. People still checking in. Good morning again. Just make sure everybody knows the plans for next day is coming up. Today I'll be here this morning, and I'll be here tonight for a session here Tokyo time tonight. Tomorrow we'll be off. I won't be here Sunday, Tokyo, morning or evening. I have to do an event in Yokohama, a kids print party. One of the girls who used to work here a couple of years back is working for some public facility, and she twisted my arm and said, come and do a print party for a few hundred kids. So that's what we're going to do. We've got some blocks for a simple kids design. We lay the blocks out on the table, 1, 2, 3. Prepare 3 brushes, 3 sets of pigment, 3 rice paste, 3 barons. Get a stack of paper at one end of the table. And me and 2 assistants, we stand behind the blocks on one side of the table. And the kids line up and they attack it from the front of the table. They'll get to me first. I show them what to do. Quick, here, grab this brush, rub on your pigment, blah, 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 blah. They get it, they move on to the next station, and the next kid comes into my station. So we've got, a total row of kids lined up at one end. And once we get started, there's a kid at every station on the block. We do the key block last for our printing. Normally, of course, key block is first, but that's because we can inspect and see the registration. For an event like this, there's no inspection, just blow them through. So we do the color first, light color first, then a dark color, then the black. That way nothing transfers. And after like 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, 3 minutes later, they've got their print. Well, what to do here? I think I've just cut the inside of this line. Now, last night I started to do the clearing. I think what I'll do is this, so that we can get the inside of this thing cleaned up. I think I'll knock the viewfinder, the view back here a bit. It's going to be a bit of fooling around with the camera, just a minute. And I got to move the camera away from the table so it doesn't get bouncy. Hang on a sec. All right, let's get Mr. Persuader out. Excuse me for the fooling around here. Okay, and of course I got to take, my voice will change now because I'm taking my microphone off my lapel and hanging it up like a meter away, because I've learned that it just, the hammer just destroys the audio. So my voice is getting lighter, but yeah, persuade, that's not my idea. I think a lot of woodworkers, that's what they call their mallets, right? I know, it's not anything original to me. Then we've got three of them. We've got the wide flat one. We've got a U gouge. I use a 15 shallow for most of my clearing near the characters. And I've got a deep 6mm. These three, I've had these three for most of my carving life. And some printers have a few more, but these ones do it for me. They'll cover everything I'm going to need here. Which way does the grain go? I can't remember. I keep forgetting which way the grain goes on this block. It's this way. Okay, going to get a bit noisy. Sorry about this. against the grain. I want to go this way, but because of the image I can't. So we get a real rough cut at the bottom here. Just to be cleaned up next step. This is against the grain too. Chip out all over the place. Okay, this should be okay. You see, I'm not holding the hammer back here. We don't need that kind of power for this. It's, you hold it up close. More accuracy, less power. Last night for this stuff, I was holding it at the back and whapping with a good big chisel. If we were doing this, I did this last night, but if this was the part, you pull your hand back, hold the hammer at the end rather than up at the front like this. It'll really blow it away. Okay. Hammer away. Mic back. Glasses Mark III away. Now back to the clearing. Pull in the lens. Where do we go now? Let's start here, I guess, kind of behind her head. Come back in. Sync seems better today, really. You mean the banging there? woodblock wrap, yeah. Like there's things I'm going to be good at, and there's things I am not in any way going to be good at ever, but a woodblock wrap, yeah. That would be the day my daughters would get over here with the white coat, strap me in, and take me away. Actually, what I should do, now that I think about it, I don't need the scope for this next part. I'm going to pull my normal lens in. Which glasses? Next step now is to try and, I don't know if you can see it at the particular camera angle, that the chisels and stuff left ridges and grooves all over the base here. I guess they're visible or not, I don't know, I'm sorry. You know, the scooping chisel scooped in U shapes, so the base here is not flat. And I've got to get it flat, or I've got to get it smooth, because when the printer later, when the printer is rubbing ink on here, it goes on the top surface, but it also catches on all these ridges on the bottom. And sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3, the pigment builds up and up and up on those ridges to a point where once you got the paper on, the pigment starts to touch from underneath. So as much as possible, this is a bit boring, I'm sorry, but I've got to smooth out, especially because you can't see what's going on, but I've got to smooth out those ridges. So she will look beautiful when it's done, this block, you know, a few days from now, once everything's finished. The last stage when it's carved, but before putting pigment on. It is so beautiful, and always, all of us who are printmakers, we always sigh at that point because the block just before the pigment looks so nice, and yet we have to get the brush out, throw the black on it. Francis, though, I guess doesn't have that much experience at doing that yet. He's done a few blocks, but for me, it never stops hurting. What do you mean? That's a bit dramatic, you know. It's always, oh, do I have to do this? It looks so beautiful, you know. Am I in range? I guess so. We also get requests, you know, will you sell the block after you finish your prints? You know, well, no, we don't do that because we don't do limited editions. Our blocks are going to be used for many, many, many years. That's fun too, you know, at my age now, 65, assuming our company sort of survives after I'm gone, it's kind of fun to think about this. This block I'm carving now should probably still be in use, I guess, after I'm gone. I'm not sure. It depends how many orders we get for this print and how well it survives. Where's it going to end up? In a drawer somewhere? Or in the stove? In the old days, they went to the stove, of course, because all the workshops were heated with a little potbelly stove. Once the blocks are no use, it's fuel for the winter. That's why there's so few of them left from the old days, you know. There was no such thing as garbage back in the Edo period. There was no garbage collection. There was no concept, no word for garbage. Everything just got sort of recycled. Well, nobody said recycling, but everything just got used up and used up and used up in different ways till there was nothing left of it. I'm not seeing what's going on here, you know. Starter set. that garbage thing. One of my collectors years ago, he's dead now unfortunately, he was a really interesting old guy, a gentleman type, ran his own business. He was collecting my poets series, really helpful to my work. He lived nearby me, so instead of mailing the print out to him every month, it became an obligation that I had to drop it off at his office. So once a month I had to, when we were mailing the batch of prints out to everybody else, I had to get on my bike and ride over to his place and drop off his print. And he would see me coming and gesture to his staff, get the tea ready, and I'd sit with him for a half an hour or so while he looked at the print and commented on it and then told stories and stuff. He was really an elegant old gentleman, very, very nice guy. It got sometimes a bit tiresome listening to him. Let's ignore that part. But he said some interesting stuff, and he told me one day, it was a sort of, how should I present this? He was talking about that idea that there was no garbage in the old days. This isn't something probably specific to Japan, but in any pre-industrial society, stuff got used and used and used, all over the place. And his point one day was that a piece of cloth, an elegant kimono that was made, and he jotted down on this piece of paper the life cycle of that piece of fabric that came out of a loom. And I don't remember the steps, and I really, really, really wish I had either made some notes or asked him to give me the scrap of paper or something, because he had like 20 steps between the woman's elegant kimono, which was used, and then the design became out of fashion and it was repurposed for something else, and way down at the bottom, like 20 steps later, it's a rag that is rubbed on the floor, No, that wouldn't even been the end. The end would have been when it was sort of wadding inside a pillow or something. I don't even remember the details, but it was hugely interesting. All the different steps that a piece of cloth could theoretically go through on its journey from wonderful kimono down to dissolving into fragments, His eyes are bright. He's telling me all this, and then. People are funny. He was a nice guy, Had a stroke. He's gone now. Crunch, crunch, crunch. With the grain, up the grain, down the grain, around the grain. I'm still in view. Right. Here's talking about tools. I'm sorry not to be able to be in contact with this. As I mentioned, later on when I'm in the printing stages of this job, or whatever jobs are going to come along, I'll be much more able to keep part of the conversations, because while you're printing, it's not necessary to keep your view focused so intensely on the work every second of the job, You pick up the brush, you dab it on, you look at the block, but then when you're rubbing, you can look away. I mentioned before, some of the old printers used to watch TV while they're doing it. So a little bit later, I'll be able to, watch and talk more carefully, more in line with the chat you're doing. But while I'm carving, it's just not possible, obviously. Alright, that's most of the gross roughness down in the bottom. Now let's grab an edge and start working up to the edge here. Let's start here, top of her head. So smooth, this is roughly smooth, this is generally smooth at the bottom here. The edge line is cut, and we've now got a ridge where I chopped out the V. We've got a ridge left. This is the final stage of the process. If I zoom in too close, then it'll keep going out of the area. Can you see it? So you can see it there. There's a sort of a rough ridge of wood left against the edge. I've got to zoom out because there's no way I can keep the camera in the same area. So first step here is just reinforce a little bit, cut that actual line a tiny bit deeper. There's no problem now because there's no stress problem because the wood is gone. And this is sort of like the continental shelf between the edge of the land there and the ocean. And this is always a point of, I can't say trouble, what's the right word? A point of sort of contention between our printers and the carvers. And they're trying to get the balance. If the carvers carve too deeply at this point, if this goes straight down too deeply, then when you're brushing later, the brushes are deep in the bottom and they bang against these lines and dump their pigment. But if this is too shallow, it's nice and smooth for brushing, but then the paper hits the lower area. So trying to find that balance between how deep to make it here so it doesn't blot, how deep to make it here so it doesn't, the brush doesn't bang. And it's difficult, and we've always got back and forth between Kawasaki-san and Chonkan, the guys who are doing our carving, and the printers. And what makes it worse, of course, that everybody has their own taste. Printer A will say, I want it a bit deeper, and printer B will say, no, that's too deep. So the carver looks at me and says, now what do you want me to do, you know? And I never had that problem when I was doing work all by myself, because I'm the carver, I'm the printer, you know, I do things to my own taste, you know. And there's no single answer, so we're constantly, it's in flux, it floats back and forth, and recently Kawasaki-san has been, she probably hasn't even noticed it herself, just bit by bit, month by month, they've been getting shallower and shallower. And this month the girls had lots of blots in the yokai prints, they spoiled lots of copies. In fact, I had to get my chisel out and cut deeper, so I got to phone her and say, we've come, you know, put the pendant back the other way, you know. You always want to try and ride right on the edge of stuff, you know. Find that best spot. Yeah, Mr. Rasta NL, you're writing to me about that, nay, your thesis about stuff, and go for it, you know, and we're open for people to come and watch and look. You know, you talked before about interns and stuff, which would be very difficult, but if you know, we're open to anybody that wants to show and explain and try and, you know. Oh, what's this? Noise. The boing is a Patreon sound. Somebody has joined Patreon. Thank you very much if it's somebody here. Actually, there's a bit of news about that. Just a minute, though. Patron doing, somebody knows it, yes. So, and there was also a question, so Sumi. Lee Valley Tools, somebody has sent me a link. Is this in the regular chat as well, so other people are going to see this? I don't know. Somebody has sent me a link to a catalog. Japanese carver set. These are elementary school tools. These are here in Japan for elementary school kids carving. They'll work well for the first little while. They'll be almost impossible to sharpen. They'll sharpen, but sort of. Do I recommend it? I don't know what to say, you know. If you've had sharpening experience and you sort of know what you're doing with trying to get a piece of metal into a sharpened condition, then you'll be able to wrestle those into good condition. If you don't know anything about sharpening at all, then that set will work for a day or two, and then it's just going to be just pushing blunt pieces of metal through wood. So what can I say? Having said that, if you have some experience at sharpening, go for that, because you'll be able to use them. Oh, you did put them in the thread. Okay, good. Thank you. And that's kind of dirt cheap. What is it, 30 bucks Canadian? I've lost track of what I'm doing here. Where am I now? I went down there. Let's go along this line. The tools you see in that link, it's elementary school students, so grade 5, grade 6. And actually, things are changing here in Japan. It used to be every elementary school student did this. They made a simple woodblock print, not multicolored. It was usually just one color. They'd cut a shape on a piece of plywood using those tools. They'd draw something on the plywood, use those tools to cut it out. Then they've got a roller brayer system, and rubbing with some kind of student level baron, a $1 baron or something, And it was fine for kids. It gave them a taste about it. There's lots of schools that don't do this anymore. Probably for the same reason that things have changed, I think, in North America. They don't want kids mucking around with knives. The culture has changed. And I'm exactly what's happened. Some kid cut himself and the mother goes apeshit and what are you doing? And whatever. Don't talk to me about that stuff. But so they don't use these so much in many, many schools. They're switching to a system where the kids get a piece of like styrofoam plastic or whatever, and they draw in it with a stylus or a pencil or something, and that pushes down a line into the plastic. So they're drawing white lines. Then once they're finished their drawing, they do the same thing. Roll the ink over the back of it, rub the back of the paper, and away you go. So it's a kind of a parody. But whatever, kids do pictures, so which is the important thing, I don't know, but I don't know what to think about it, just a different world, I don't know. I mean, no difference in the end. I didn't learn this in school, I didn't get the inspiration in school, so it's not something that I think is essential for an education. I vaguely remember art classes like in school, it was something we all had to take up until some level, and my God, I was so bad at it. I get this though every day of my life, people in the shop here chatting, calling me an artist. Sometimes I have the conversation, sometimes I just let it go, if that's what they think, that's fine, but there's artistic aspects to what I do, when it comes time to mixing the colors for this and to getting a print with a nice, good overall appearance and balance. I'm not brain dead for that stuff, but when people use the word artist, they're talking about someone who can create something from nothing, sit down with a piece of paper or whatever and create something like Jed can. And that is not me. I heard the doing, not doing, Where are we? Question. Were there female carvers, printers, artists in the 19th century? I know, I'm not, the total expert on this kind of stuff, but to my knowledge, pretty much absolutely no. In recent years, we've had a bit of publicity about Hokusai's daughter, Oe-san, who apparently was really pretty good at drawing, and the question is how much of his work she did herself. There's been an anime about it, there's been a bunch of documentaries about it. But as far as the craftsman teams go, I have no documentation, I can't prove this to you, but there's just no way women were part of that world. It was a man's world. Men did it, just not as a question of discrimination, it was just that was society's rules. Things like carvers and printers were young boys went as apprentices to do it, and women, of course, did women's stuff, expecting to be going on to be mothers and housewives and stuff. So no, we have no record of this at all. And sometimes people get confused because there are a few famous ukiyo-e prints, parody prints, that show a printer's workshop and a carver's workshop, and they're all a bunch of women in beautiful flowing kimonos, wielding chisels and wielding barons and stuff like this. I think Toyokuni did one, and I think it was Kuniyoshi, I can't remember. They were parodies, absolute parodies. There's no way women sit there with the most top quality, beautiful kimono in a printer's workshop. They were parody prints. And people write me, no, Dave, there it is, there's the evidence. Women used to do this, And no, they didn't. Please understand, they didn't. I've got a photograph from a workshop that was taken, actually it was taken exactly the year I was born, 1951. There's a magazine, I forget the title of it, Monthly Asahi or something, whatever. It's been going on for many, many, many decades before I was born. A weekly sort of news magazine with photographs. And for one of the issues somewhere in 1951, they took an American who was here in Japan, a researcher, Richard Lane. He's now long gone. He was here in Tokyo as an ukiyo-e researcher. And they did a feature story on him, 3 or 4 pages of photographs and stuff. And he was quite a strange character. He was, he wore ladies' dresses and stuff, and interesting for 1951, whatever. So they show stuff about his lifestyle, with him folding his clothes in his room and stuff like this. And he was doing ukiyo-e research, not in the craftsman's sense, but in the, when was Toyokuni born and what did he do and how many princes did he have, so doing academic research. And they took him to a printmaker's workshop, a printer's workshop one day. And he's there in his summer yukata, like a little delicate lady with his little purse hanging from his hand. And there's pictures of him there and the guys in the workshop. And these guys, it's the middle of summer, it's August or something, and they are naked except for the tiny little, somebody put a cloth over their loins so that the photograph would be okay. They are sweating, they're working through, you can see stacks of paper on the blocks, like 300 sheets, 3,000 sheets of paper stacked up in front of the guys. There's a picture of one guy, we can see him from the back 3/4 view. He's got this monstrous tattoo all over his body of a carp, the classical carp climbing a waterfall. We can see half, a bit of his face, he's turned away from the camera, we can see this huge grin, he's sitting there grinning at this whole thing. And they put the American for the next photograph in this guy's bench to sit down and show him. And Mr. Lane is sitting there holding the baron like sort of a young lady would hold it, and with his fingers in between his fingers, and like, now what do I do? And he's grinning, and he tries to rub it across the back of the paper. And the contrast between this vigorous, muscular, sweat-soaked, naked male who is obviously going bang, 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 bang through this job, and then this delicate creature. I had correspondence with Mr. Lane too later in life. Interesting guy. I'm not saying anything that's hopefully trying to be insulting to him, just describing who he was and what it looked like there. So. And it's a hugely interesting picture. I know about it because one day when I was just browsing in a bookshop here, the book caught my eye and it said Snapshot of Japan 1951. And what it was a selection of stories from that magazine from 1951. And that's my birth year. So when I saw that magazine, Snapshot of Japan 1951, of course I grabbed it. Flipping through it, stories about the movie stars of the day and the government problems of the day and the train crashes. And in there's this story about Richard Lane and this picture of a printer. It was man's work, vivid, vigorous, difficult, sweat-soaked man's work. What's that bong sound somebody's saying? The sosumi sound, ka-chang, like a piano keyboard. That's the sound that says questions. The boing-oing-oing sound is a new Patreon person coming in. Can you see what I'm doing? I think I'm near the edge of the camera. Tick, tick, tick. I want to be careful. Now that I've put the scope away, I'm wandering all over the surface of my bench here, so it's quite easy to go out of the camera range. So, like, what am I going to say? Let me know. They used to print so many copies of things, in the old days. This was the printing business. They're printing some book or whatever. It's just thousands and thousands and thousands of copies. They were literally human-like automata, robots. But they worked so fast. From their point of view, people like me, we're just fooling around. We're just playing with this. And even the other craftsmen here in Tokyo, if you took an old craftsman from the old days and showed him any typical Tokyo workshop today, he's just going to hold his head. Oh my God, these guys think they're craftsmen. Give me a break. But it's okay. We do what we can. We're working to a very high standards. Nothing to be ashamed of here. There's no... I measure my results against their results. We try and make prints that are as beautiful as the best ones that were made. But it's a different environment. I can't measure everything I do by their standards. It just doesn't work like that. So it's okay. We make beautiful prints. This is tough now, running down the wood grain. As I said before, it's just a few degrees off. Luckily for me now, the wood grain is this way, so it's going to split out. But if it was this way, I'd be in big, big trouble. I'd have to go just millimeter by millimeter. Well, which is basically what I'm doing anyway, but whatever. I think you see it. Turn it, is that easier if you see? I don't know. It's hard to see. So this inside of this line is easy, but when I'm doing the outside later, that's when it's going to chip. And I can't come this way because it's against the grain. Not so interesting here today, I'm sorry, but this is part of the job, so. Oops. How wasteful was the traditional print industry in Japan? Blah 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 blah. All these things that these days that we think of as Japanese art, the famous ukiyo-e prints and whatever, they weren't art back in the day. They were printed objects like sort of posters, flyers, you name it. Most of the printing activity back then was books, a functional product. So the famous prints that we see were sort of an offshoot or a thing of that. It was the printing industry. They didn't think of any of this stuff as art. Art back in those days was painted screens, it was flower arranging, it was classical dance. The printing business had absolutely nothing to do with those things and nothing to do with art. So you're talking about how wasteful was it? It was an industry. It was an industrial process. They made woodblock prints like the Great Wave, and they made books and pamphlets and food wrappers and posters and sumo tournament announcements with all the guys' names listed. It was an industrial process. So just the same as when they make, say, a newspaper today, whatever, they roll the big paper into the machine, the first few copies are getting registration worked out, and then bang, 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 roll it off. There was nothing to do with art whatsoever. It was the printing business. I got a video planned, one of the David's Choice videos. I'm going to do one on showing people some of the books, which was the main business of all the carvers and printers back in that day. It was a super literate populace all through like the late 1700s into the 1800s. And everybody read, housewives read, samurai read, you name it, everybody read stuff. And there were educational treatises, but most of it was just novels, serialized novels. And it was done in serial fashion. A writer and a designer, illustrator together, under the auspices of a publisher, would start a book series. And the books were published 2 at a time in pairs. Volume 1 would come in what they call up and down. Sounds a bit silly in English, but joge. Volume 1, Part 1, Part 2. And rarely Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. But anyway, so Volume 1 had Part 1, Part 2. And then, depending on the popularity of the work or how well they expected it to sell, whatever, 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks later, usually 2-week cycle is what I'm told, the next part would come out. So during those 2 weeks, a team of people were publishing the book. The writer had his deadline, the designer had his deadline, they'd hand in the work, the production team gets busy with it. And they are so fantastic to look at. We've got tens of thousands of them left over here because they were made in vast quantities. Everybody read them. And people got them in 2 ways. They either just went to the bookshop and bought them and kept the book when they'd finished reading it, same as we might do today. Or they'd rent it, and the publishers themselves ran rental systems. They'd outfit a guy with a sort of bookcase on his back. He'd walk around town with the latest episodes of their various serials. And he had a route, like it would be every second Tuesday he'd go down that street or something, ring his bell, whatever. The housewives hear him coming, out they come, they return the one they rented 2 weeks ago, or whatever his cycle was, and get the new issues, you know. Pay their, whatever the tiny fee they're paying was, you know. It was a huge, huge business. We've got a bunch of them in the shop here, and I'm gonna do a video when I get a minute, the David's Choice video, showing these things. And there's so many interesting things about how they were made. None of that movable type stuff for the Japanese. They tried that and tested that in the late 1600s, I think, way back in the day when Europe had first glommed onto it. Some Jesuit priest brought a press over here and they worked out some movable type for some basic Japanese characters. There were a few things published, and then the Japanese gave up on that, went back to using carved type. Books, books, books. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Love it. Okay, that corner's done. Now this next part is tough because we're working, you can see what's going on. Let's put it straight so you can see it. The wood block is here. The wood grain comes this way. I want to scoop, scoop, scoop this way. But these lines now, let's turn it around. You see the full, let me zoom out. Okay, the wood grain runs this way in the sense that I want to scoop. I can scoop this way easily. It doesn't go against the grain. If I try to scoop this way, it sticks in. But now all these last lines, now they're running up against the carved line. So what I want to do is turn it. And look at this. I want to run here so that my chisel moves away from the carved lines. But that's against the grain. And my chisel is going to grump, dig into the wood. I have no choice. I got to do it this way. But what I'm going to do then is, you can't see this, but what I'm doing with my right hand, I'm pushing the blade of the chisel down as hard as I can. And I've turned it into a plain blade. How can I explain this? If I just carve like this, it just digs in. It doesn't scoop things out. But if I push down on it and scoop, 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 we can get wood away even though we're against the grain. For the most part, it's going to dig in a few places. Totally ugly. Look at this. Push down, push down, push down, push down, push down. But gets the job done. You know, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. The grain goes certain directions. And when it speaks, you have no choice. It's just, that's what it is. You know. Maybe in the future, people are going to grow some artificial trees in the lab, and we can get wood that has grain that's all perfect or something. But at the moment, This is why I wanted to get those big chisels as close to the line as possible to minimize the amount of this stuff. But here we go. Okay, that's done. Where are we next? What's next? Behind her head. And the same situation, this coming up this way is going to be against the grain. So first let's clear a V. Again, as we've mentioned before in some of these streams, I don't know who's here, who's heard what. The hair you see here right now, it looks black, that's fine, but the key block for this print will not be printed in jet black like this. The key lines, which are the lines of her body, the face, her small hair, and just this mass are going to get printed in gray. There's no way we could make a print with rich black hair here and yet a fine, delicate nose and mouth. So this block, I'm going to carve it here like this, will be a light gray block. And when you first see that, the first test printing, you're going to think like, what's this? No black hair. But later, when we prepare colors, there'll be an octopus skin tone, there'll be a background tone, and there will be a black block. The black block will have not the light part of her hair, but it'll have a hair mass with lines cut in it, octopus eyes, both for the little guy and the big guy. So black is going to appear here as a color later on. So what I'm doing at this point, this hair mass is an undertone, and it's just basically showing where the hair will be. But this won't be for the black hair itself. Oh, that came out nicely. Am I still visible? Eh? 9:22. Here it was. We're happy. The day is about to begin. What is it? It's Saturday today. On duty are Kawai-san and Matsumura-san. And we've got a funny party. The first party at 10 o'clock, they have requested 7 people. And we can't do that. Our room takes we like to do them up to 4. And when it's a single group, we allow it up to 5, 2 parents, 3 kids, whatever, stuff like that. And these people must have phoned one of our staff members a week or so ago and said, look, we really want to do it with 7 people. And the staff member must have said, no, we don't do that. And then, split into 2 groups, 4 and 3 or whatever, But the back and forth must have gone on, and the person must have said, we can't do that, all or nothing. And I guess the staff member said, well, okay, whatever, it's on your head, we'll try and do it, but it's going to be kind of chaos. So they took the reservation for 7 people, which I wouldn't have done. There's no way, we're trying to give a quality product, is that the word here? So there it is, it's on the books for 10 o'clock, 7 people. It's going to be freaking chaos. Because there's another group at 11:30 coming. We've got to get these people out of here. It doesn't matter how much they say at reservation time. Oh, it's okay. It doesn't matter if it's a bit chaotic or whatever. So I'll be doing this first party. Kawai-san's okay, but to handle a mess like that. Same thing, we're against the grain. So vertical pressure. Kawai-san, good morning. 体験でしょ ?7 人でしょわかんない。誰があの予約取ったかなわかんない。横須賀か。お母さんたちですね。そう。だからもう頑張りますが、じゃあ私ももちろん一緒にやりますから。そう。
ファイルだったら多分松村君と
の僕やりましょう。いや、no problem, no problem. 楽しみに。ですから、11時半予約ないでしょ？
ないです。
だから、ステップ1、人が来ると、じゃあ、もしね、4人と3人分けて、半分が戦争に行ってくださいとか。
次、7人だともう、リザベース2時半で。
そう、だからあとはないでしょ？そう。だから、we'll see。もうそろそろ、もう今、そう。どんどんできてますね。
その、坂目っていうか、リバースしてるの。
今坂目でしょ？だから今、押しながら。
で、横にスライドさせてんの。
そう。だから、さあ。これ。そう、でもまだ悪いね。
カサカサになるんですよ、やっぱり。坂になると。
しょうがないですね。そう、今横ですね。この形じゃないですね。
このホットゾーンだ。
これからね、
楽しみですね。
明日はしょうがない。明日横浜のイベントですね。オナデルさんの、そう。何百人の体験。これ、下井さんのテストですね。そう。ちょっと紙をチェックしてください。昨日の夜、テコさんが用意したんですけど、僕まだ見てないです。多分みんな、おはようございます。河合さん、It's here でしょ？おはよう河合さんとか。ちょっと待って、カメラを用意して、この中ですね。
Good morning, everybody.
I don't think we've seen Kawai-san for a few days. He's been here. Don't bang the camera. Anyway, get the paper check. So. 7 people. Somebody made a reservation for 7 people this morning. They start at 10. And if they won't split into 2 groups, 4 and 7, it's going to be absolute chaos. Would Japanese still sound magical to me if I knew what was being said? I don't know. It's just another language, you know. We all have these images and views of what languages mean. When I was a kid, growing up in the 50s and stuff, we saw movies and whatever, and it was war movies, and the Germans were the bad guys. This was 1950s, of course, whatever. It was the victorious West. So for me, the sound of the German voice was irrevocably mixed up with these bad guys, inhuman characters who killed babies and whatever, So when I grew up, hearing a German voice, it triggers this sort of, these are bad guys, I'm talking about, as a child and teenager and whatever. So German sounded to me like something not good, bad, The Japanese movies never had anything like, because I don't think people spoke anything like Japanese in the movies that were based in the Pacific, So I didn't grow up with any negative feeling about the Japanese or Chinese language, whatever, So, and I'm sure as a kid I wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. Somebody speaking Chinese, somebody speaking Japanese, They are wildly, wildly different in sound, wildly different in sound, And out on the streets here now in Asakusa, every day I'm surrounded by Chinese because there are a huge number of tourists now. The growth in their economy, and we're so close. And although the Chinese government is, always propagandizing down against Japan, Mr. and Mrs. China, they don't care. They're happy to come here and buy their cosmetics and baby diapers and stuff that they think are safer here in Japan than they are in China. So. But yeah, does Japanese sound magical or cool or evil? We all have our own prejudices built in from when we were kids, I guess. But yeah, those movies, Germans, they were bad people, you know. 1950s. Spinning around a bit too much, I'm sorry. You know, it's wood grain, I've got to go certain directions. Okay, I'm happy here with the way this turned out. I know this is a good way to stop here today, this morning. I'll finish off this corner. The block is basically cut, basically cleared. What's left to go are a few things. I've got the outside border still to cut. And then, of course, we've got her thatch, whatever we call it. Is that a nice word? I don't know. I think it's okay. And then the last step is her hair, which is going to be quite the job. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to carve it here on this block, but I'm going to consider that to be a test run, because I really suspect this block isn't hard enough and dense enough for those light hairs. So we'll carve it as a test run. If it works, it works. And plan B is to get another piece of boxwood and carve just her facial features, eyes, nose, mouth, and that ring of hair. We can easily print that in separately. Okay. Here we are, looking good, looking good. I'm so happy. You know, being on Twitch has forced me to be here day after day after day, made possible by the patron thing with the 3 new staff members. Just whatever. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, the Kickstarter thing, it's separate from all that. That's the Jed thing to push Jed around. But I'm very happy the way things have gone the last few months. Okay, here we are. Again, to revamp, Saturday. I'll be back here tonight again to be working on the outside border of this thing. Sunday will be off. Talking about Japanese time. Sunday will be off. No stream. I'll be in Yokohama. And I'll be back at it Monday morning, which I guess is maybe work on the thatch. Thank you very much again. I'm going to read this stream. It seems like it's a lot of game talk. Might have been a lot of print talk. Francis, I hope, is taking care of it. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for being in the community. I'll be back again later tonight. Thank you.